I always am so excited to chat with you because you're always working on like anything that's interesting involving women too and female
Ah,
characters. And
thank
so it's
you.
like no surprise, like Handmaid's Tale. I'm just thinking about where your name always pops up. But I have to ask, like, were you a fan of Yellowjackets coming into working on this show?
I was such a fan of Yellowjackets. We devoured the first season. And so I definitely, when my agents brought it up, I was like, yeah, can we be calling about that one for sure? I was really excited to be asked to direct on Yellowjackets. Yeah.
Did you feel like it was like your kind of show, like it had like the bread and butter of like a Liz Garbus type of show to work on?
And, it's like, yeah, in many ways. I mean, it has women with complex relationships, with rich, complicated lives. And I was about to say, like, realistic and talk about realism. And of course, it's all like, there's so much mystical that goes on, but it all kind of, speaks to larger truths in female relationships in various stages of life, trauma, processing of trauma. I mean, it certainly shares that with Yellowjackets, and with a lot of the doc work I've done for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So you directed one of the show-stopping episodes of the season, I think. Did you have any kind of choice in which episode you got to direct?
No, I didn't. Well, I mean, yes, of course I had choice in terms of scheduling, et cetera. But this was the episode that they really wanted me to do. At a certain point, it looked like my dates were shifting, and we talked about potentially another episode, but they did express that this was one. I don't know, I hadn't been written yet or shared with me, but I'm sure it was blocked out that they did really want me for. And I feel really lucky for that. That they understood in some way that this would be a really good fit for me material wise. Of course, the directors on this season show are all amazing and could have killed it. But I'm really happy that we did. I did find episode 6 as my project. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like this episode had to be like an all hands on deck episode. Like for the 1996 section, like all of the characters are in one room together. And I was thinking, like, as a director, how did you utilize that space and the characters? Like, even when they're in the background, it's probably like everybody kind of has to be on, I feel like.
That's right. I mean, in this episode, there was really no escape from that cabin. There was a
Yeah.
terrible storm. They were staying inside, and of course, Shauna was going through labor. Um, the blocking was something I was thinking about a lot. Right from getting the script, like how are we going to keep it alive, and each scene feeling different, even though most of the scenes were taking place in the same room. So what I was really lucky that we worked rehearsal time into the schedule, which is very rare. So I got to work with the 1996 cast at rehearsal and just like go through a lot of different blocking so that by the time we showed up on set and we had so much work to do in the cabin in a pretty tight schedule, everybody really already had a feel for what they were doing, and I could troubleshoot it in advance so we could think about kind of making sure everybody had the right props, because everybody needed to be doing something. It was an
Yeah.
all on deck moment for all the Yellowjackets. It wasn't a two-hander or so yeah, so it was really about getting that extra prep time that I think made it flow.
I think it's almost like I was thinking about like the choreography in the beginning of like I was thinking how many times did they probably bring Shauna in and have people, it was probably like a dance almost of like having that all timed perfectly. Because it looks so good. So
Yeah,
um
thanks. And we went through some hard, I mean, it was obviously a tough episode for Sophie Nélisse. I mean,
yeah.
Um, and we had something really sad happen, which was there was an error on one of the drives. So we ended up having to reshoot the first scene where she's in labor and pushing, and we had to
Oh,
come back and reshoot it like 3 weeks later because the material got corrupted.
oh.
And I was concerned. I mean, they were so in the zone, but they really just like showed up and brought it. And we went through that blocking again, and Sophie is such an incredible actor, and she just went right back into character into that moment and nailed it.
Wow. I feel like there's a lot of turning points for characters in this episode, and obviously for Shauna, but Misty was one. I think she has a big episode. And it's funny to compare this episode to when the plane crashed, where she like took action, and this one she's kind of frozen. How has like do you think the death of Crystal has marked like I feel like it's marked a turning point for her where in her sociopathy, where there's almost no going back. Like this is where she just the point of no return. But I wanted to know what you thought of
Well,
that.
I do think it is a really big episode for Misty's character and of course for Shauna too. And I think when you think about their adult characters after episode 6 of season 2, you really have so much more insight into them and what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
For Shauna dealing with the loss of that baby, like that's a huge thing for Melanie Linsky to kind of take with
Hmm.
her as she embodies adult Shauna. And for Misty, the death of the friend, the shame, the guilt of really being, one of the reasons they're stuck there, and not being able to help her friend and witnessing her death. Like these are big things the adult characters are taking with them that the younger cast really executed at such a high level. So yeah, there was a lot of trauma that was seeded in episode 6, which of course you see the fruits of, or the fruits or the poison fruits of later as in their adulthood.
Yeah. Simone Kissel has a great scene with her therapist. I use that in quotation. Um, what was it like filming that scene where there were really like no cuts? Did you give her any direction? I love also the creepy shadow against the wall. It was just so well done, that scene.
Well, I wanted to make this all, I think as the viewer is watching adult Lottie, they're really trying to grapple with who this person is, like
Yeah.
nefarious, how damaged, how enlightened, like what is going on. And both Courtney and Simone, like there's that combination of innocence and nurturing with potential danger that they capture so beautifully. And of
Yeah.
course, the writers have written such a beautiful character. So when Simone is doing that, and I don't want their, to do any season spoilers, but because this is going to go on before the end, right?
I don't know. That'll be up to will be up to your publicist when they want this to.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to do
No,
any
I
season.
you're not locked into a certain time. So
Okay, well, without
yeah.
revealing anything that would happen at in the season finale, the that scene is very much about being inside Simone's head, right? Inside
Yeah.
Lottie's head, and
Hmm.
it's not about a two-hander with her and a therapist. So for me, just having the camera on this like really, really, really slow pan as
Yes.
Simone is going like deeper and deeper and deeper into her fears with an actor at that level. When you're doing a wonder like that, it's really exciting to watch. I mean, like I would just be sitting there at the monitor sometimes, like forgetting to call cut because I was so in it, and the camera work, the camera work was so beautiful, and our dolly operator got it like right on. So that was a really fun scene to shoot. And yes, we had the actor of the therapist there. But I really just shot over her shoulder, which is what casts the shadow. Like we never cut back to her, which I'm sure was kind of annoying for her after being gone through hair and makeup. But she has her other moments. But
Yeah.
it was just really powerful to just sort of be with Lottie and be like living in that question of who is this person? Is she on the level? Is this a fantasy? What's going on?
And Simone's so good in that scene too, because that intensity, it just keeps like with the pan, it's like the intensity is growing. It really works well together. Um, so you kind of talked about this a little bit, but you put the cast, the 1996 cast really runs the gamut of emotions. I was thinking about the happy, healthy delivery that you filmed, the sad one, and then the real one, and then the we ate the baby scene, which like I thought that had to wreck everyone emotionally. I guess like what was it like having them do these three different scenes?
Well, yeah, I mean, the scene where the real scene where Shauna comes to and realizes the baby has been stillborn was a real packed a real emotional wallop. And Sophie was so deep in, and she really just the grief and the pain and the shock and the surprise. I mean, we as viewers were like Sophie, hopefully if we did our jobs, believing in this myth of this baby. And
Yeah.
that was very fraught with the pain of not being able to breastfeed, which is, a story that like so many women can identify with
Right.
that I haven't seen much. Like that
Mhm.
grief, that feeling of inadequacy, that feeling of desperation, and of course times like 10 million if you're in the wild having that happen. um, there's no lactation consultants coming in to
Right.
save her.
Yeah.
But the scene where Shauna wakes up to find her baby has been stillborn was really hard, and by the end of the last take the entire cast was just in tears. I mean, it was really,
Wow.
I was too. I mean, it was really just, she gave it her all. We all felt like that we had gone on this roller coaster. The scene where, to be real, the scene where they're like pretend, eating the baby, we giggle. I mean, there were giggles. It's not, I mean, those guys
Right.
turn it on and turn it off. And hey, this was like their second cannibalism scene. So,
Right, that's true.
sure.
They're used to it by now.
And of course, like the happy baby scene was its own thing. And the babies who we had on set were such good babies. And of course they're twins, and so they don't have to work too long.
Yeah.
But it was great because Sophie, who of course the actor who plays Shauna is not a mom. So for her, holding a baby was like a new experience. Like she didn't have cousins, baby nephews, whatever. Like this was a new thing for her. So her kind of uncomfortableness, like getting to learn how to hold a baby, was certainly part of what we wanted to have happen on set. Because it can be a pretty shockingly scary, difficult thing. How do I
Yeah.
manage this new life around me? But another funny thing was that the babies, like generally babies on set, like they just won't stop crying, and oftentimes you don't want them crying. And this was a time where we really wanted crying babies because the show, I mean, the episode was really about like this baby not
Yeah.
get fed. Um,
Yeah.
and these babies were so happy that we had to like, I don't know, tickle their feet until they
Oh,
cried. And it was, so it was an adventure.
did you have an order that you shot, like, those 3 scenes, or did you do it chronologically, or did you kind of like, "Let's do the emotionally devastating one last?"
Um, God, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I believe that we ran those pretty much in scene order. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, no, but no, except I believe that the last scene we shot, I think in the cabin, was the cannibalism scene. So we shot out the sort of her waking up, which was a certain kind of very hard work that it was good to have under our belt before the last scene.
Yeah. So yeah, this has been a great conversation. I have one last question. So you're talking about Sophie and Elise and that devastating final scene. What did you talk about with her ahead of time and for to get her to that moment? I mean, she's so great in this episode, and that final, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And I was wondering, like, as a director, what did you talk to her about?
Sophie is such a great young actor. I mean, it's so exciting to think about all the incredible roles she has in front of her that we'll all get to witness as audience members and fans. Um, I started off really early in the process of just like reaching out to her. She had a big episode. What could we do? What could I do as a director to put her on her best feet? And so we watched a bunch of film. I gave her films to watch, videos to watch about the birth process. I think, of course, there's the last scene where she channels so beautifully the grief and pain and longing and shock and betrayal
Yeah.
that she feels. But I also think one of the most beautiful moments in that episode is the happiness she feels when the baby latches on to feed
Yeah.
in her
Hmm.
fantasy, in her night, in her dream of the baby living, and the kind of because it's a subtler moment, and it's something again that's so familiar to so many women who have tried to breastfeed, had trouble, and then finally gotten through it. And she really just like captured that relief and that also that feeling of alienation so beautifully. But yeah, for that last moment, I mean, Sophie had so many ideas about how to play it. I mean, I felt like I was there to support her to just do her best work.
Yeah, it's really, it was, when I first watched it, I'm like, wow, this was just an amazing episode. So
Thank you.
everybody, yeah, everybody did such a great job, and you did such a good job directing it. So
Thank you.
yeah, those are all my questions. Thank you so much for your time and for wonderful television. So
Thank you,
yeah,
Megan. All
thank
right.
you.
Well, have a great weekend.
You too.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.